On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Kris. And Kris was married to a conniving, coercive controller. It's a story of generational trauma, future faking, intermittent reinforcement, financial abuse, minimization, gaslighting, isolation, guilt, and intimidation. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Kris. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am doing well, and thank you for asking. And if you want to be a guest like Kris is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form at the top of the page. And inside, you can fill out that guest form, or you can email us at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also, join our newsletter on our website. We started a weekly newsletter, including a workbook for this episode that you can download from our newsletter. And so far, people have found our workbooks very helpful. It's a very valuable tool in understanding what's happened in your relationship. In the newsletter, you get, these 5 things, 5 reflections as well inside there to kind of go over your own relationship, what's happened inside the relationship, outside the relationship, your feelings, everything within the episode, how it reflects upon your life as well. And people really like it, and it's free. So go to our website. On the front page, you should be able to find a newsletter sign up, or we're going to leave a link in our show notes. And this episode does have a content warning as we do discuss physical abuse, sexual abuse, and reproductive control in this episode. And today you're going to hear Kris's story. And Kris grew up in abuse, and leaving the home became a priority for her. And unfortunately, it was to live with someone who was even more controlling than her family was, than her dad was. And Kris's story has all the elements of coercive control. The abuser became the truth teller in her world. And from then on, with the intermittent reinforcement, Kris was constantly on her back foot, reacting, questioning herself, and unable to leave. So many of you will be validated by Kris's story today. And now I'm going to get out of my way in your way. Kris, the floor is now yours.
So I grew up in Sacramento, California, small town just outside of it. My mom ran a daycare from the house. My dad worked in pest control. I was the middle child of 5 children. I have 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters. And my dad made good money, but that really only goes so far in California with 5 kids. So that led to a lot of tension in the house, and just the chaos of having 5 children led to a lot of tension in the house, especially my oldest brother. He was kind of the scapegoat of the children. He is technically my dad's stepson, even though my dad's been involved in his life since he was less than a year old. But my dad, never had the best relationship with him. And there was a lot of physical abuse that happened there. So it was always chaotic, always very tense. My dad was very authoritarian in his parenting. It was constant control, constant fear. There was some movie that we watched when we were kids that was like, it's my way and that's it. There is no highway option. And I always thought that like he took that line and was like, I'm going to make my whole life based off of this line. So there was a lot of fear towards him growing up. 5 o'clock would hit and we would all go from hanging out into the living room and then hide in our bedrooms because we knew that dad was going to be home soon. I was very expressive. I was very loud. Like I said, I'm the middle child. And so I love being the center of attention. I always have. My mom has stories about me dancing on tables, and I was in dance when I was younger, and I wanted as much attention as I could possibly get. Which now I realize I was very externally validated, like seek my validation externally. throughout my life, I've become a teacher. And one thing we learned being teachers is intrinsic motivation. So you don't tell a kid, oh, I'm so proud of you. You say, oh, you should be so proud of yourself. You work so hard. I didn't really get either of that. So I was looking for that positive attention, any affirmations from anywhere, and I'll be the loudest one in the room to get someone to comment on it. Our house was really a really negative place, which sucked. There was a lot of fun. 5 kids in a room, you're going to have a ton of fun. But we also did pick on each other a lot. We were kind of encouraged, especially by my dad, to do that because he would go around and say something to one kid about another kid. And so I was very frequently, when I was younger, picked on about my weight. And then as I went towards my teenage years, my body started developing and I got into sports. And so I was very curvy. So it went from being, oh, she's fat. And then there was an over sexualization of my body. And it led to all sorts of weird comments at like 15 years old. I had just had my first kiss with a boy, but I had all these comments that were constantly being made at me from my family. And there was a lot of shame that came along with that. We didn't really know who we were. It was just whoever we were allowed to be based off of my dad's rules. So we had this kind of identity foreclosure that he did where we had no room to explore. Things were really bad and continued being bad. He was very spare the rod, spoil the child. By the time I was 8, that's the first time I remember having these sort of survival ideas in my head. I remember squeezing myself in between my bed and my dresser in this tiny little space and thinking, okay, I only have 10 more years until I can move out. And so my mindset kind of became more towards survival, more towards freedom. And, that's so young to have those thoughts, but it was get out at any cost. And I think that really primed me for some narcissist abuse later in my life. So I lost the ability to have a safe childhood. I lost the ability to kind of develop a really stable sense of health and self. I learned how to read moods. I learned how to perform for people based off of what I thought they needed and get their approval. And then a lot of the love was very conditional, and you would only get nice reactions from my dad if you did what he wanted. And the goalpost was always moving. So you had to take a wild guess at what he wanted and just maybe he was happy with you. You would do the exact same thing the next day, and maybe he would just be absolutely livid with you.
So you've had this upbringing where you are being seen as not being kind of an autonomous person in a lot of ways. You have now been taught to always be on alert for other people's moods, and you have been taught to conform to what is going on. And these are your survival techniques. And this has kept you going, and it has kept you to the point to where when you do get out of the house, all of these things, if not dealt with right away, can really hinder you in relationships, even if they're healthy relationships going forward, as far as what your worth is, boundaries, and just generally taking care of yourself first over other people. If you were even in a healthy relationship, if you were on an airplane, you would definitely be putting the oxygen mask over other people first before you were putting it on yourself. It's admirable. And those things can be seen by friends and all these people as, hey, Kris is a good person. We know Kris is a good person. But sometimes your friends also know that Kris puts other people before Kris puts Kris first, and we want what's best for Kris. And sometimes we wish Kris did more for herself. So, with that being said, when you get into a relationship with someone who's abusive, whether you have issues like this or not, they're going to try their best to figure out how to manipulate whatever type of person you are. But with the stuff that you're coming in with here, it's going to be a little bit easier, or at least easier for them to figure out what to do. And your reactions to things will be known to them pretty quickly. Whereas maybe they'll have to, with someone else, kind of figure out what those reactions could be or how to manipulate them into feeling a specific way over a certain period of time before they can do what they want to do. So, with that being said, eventually you do meet the person that this story is about. So, take us from here.
Yes. So I was 13 years old, which would have made him 15. And it was at a mutual friend's birthday party at a park. And I wasn't even super close with this girl. I just knew that this other boy was going to be there, and I had a crush on this other boy. So I wanted to go and just stare at him across the room the entire time, like the little awkward 13-year-old that I was. And then my ex popped up, and he was friends with a group of friends that I was hanging out with. He knew all of them. They only referred to him as Troll. That was his nickname. And now that I'm adult, I'm like, oh yeah, that was really fitting. I wasn't even really attracted to him at the time. He just started giving me attention. And, due to that external validation that I was searching for, a little bit of tension just fed me so much. So I had this hunger for any sort of attachment. And I took it there. He and I started talking. I ended up getting his phone number. He was a freshman in high school. I was going into 8th grade. So we didn't ever see each other in school, and we became friends that solely communicated through text. There wasn't really any real life interaction until my junior year of high school. Like, we would see each other walking past in the hall and just stare at each other. But as far as talking at school, no one knew we were friends. So there was just this false sense of intimacy that we would be talking about, really deep things. He became my confidant in a lot of things. I would tell him about my troubles with my dad, questioning my friendships, it just everything that being a teenager is the first time. And all of the teenage struggles I would talk to him about. And he would turn around and continue to question my friendships. And it would turn these little issues into these much bigger issues. So he would mirror my insecurities that I had in my friendships and then blow them way out of proportion. And now as an adult, I realized that he was subtly trying to isolate me in the tiniest ways from my friend group. And that's something that continued in our entire relationship. So I lost a lot of perspective there and really started to rely on his perspective. Being chosen by him for this attention felt like safety to me. It felt like I finally had someone that understood me. And then, now I realize that's a lot of manipulation. His family, I never really went over there until we started dating. But when I started going over there, I found out how wealthy his family was. We lived in a smaller town in California, especially. You own an acre of property, and it's, you're rich because of that, especially in the Sacramento area. And his family owned 60 acres and had barns on it. And there was an old airplane hangar on it. And they used to fly planes off of the landing strip on the property. And there was a car barn. And I didn't come from very much. So going over there, I was just blown away with what I was surrounded by and a little awestruck. There was also a lot of entitlement with that family. They were very image focused, and then all of them nicknamed him the golden child. So it kind of made his entitlement worse. His family had a very weird thing about blood relations specifically. All step siblings were raised. blood mattered more than anything. It had a really rigid family system. And like there were times where he would be having family dinner and I would be like, oh, okay, while we were dating, what time do we go over there? And he's like, oh, it's blood only. And so no girlfriends, no partners, no stepkids were allowed. It was blood only. It was a very interesting family dynamic.
So at this point, you have a relationship, at least offline. School is its own beast. There's a lot of questioning that goes on here about your friends and kind of putting a bit of an isolation aspect into things right here. And you are getting the things you're not getting at home from him. So it feels good. And that's going to override everything at this point. And the fact that you're in school and then you go home and it's not, you're young. So who knows what's going on? These boundaries, in some sort of sense, are instituted where your interaction isn't going to be the same as if someone was like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Because you're so young, you have to go home. There's a lot of kind of stuff in between that makes it feel more like a long distance relationship, in a sense that you're not going to know everything that's going on. But there are odd things that are happening. You know that his family is the way it is. It's this very judgmental, outward, superficial kind of look, vanity kind of look on things, or status. So that's kind of what you're walking into. And now you're going to start to date a little here. He has an enmeshment stuff going on too. So you're going to start to date a little here. So what are your dates kind of like here? And is there like anything out of the ordinary going on, or is it just like, oh, we're pretty young, this is like normal stuff?
So we started dating while he was 18. And we were actually long distance when we first started dating. Like I said, we had talked, we had text every day, all the time, from when I was 13 to when I was 18. Maybe seen each other and talked at school a dozen times in those years. And we had always had crushes on each other, but either he would be in a relationship or I would be in a relationship, and it just never lined up. So he was getting ready to get deployed to Korea with the army. And he came home on a leave right before he left and randomly one night asked me to go shooting on his family's property. And I was terrified because it was like 10 o'clock at night. And my parents, like I said, were extremely strict. And I remember I just gotten out of the shower and was all ready for bed when he texted me and had to go in and ask my parents, who were laying in bed, who were never awake at 10 o'clock, oh, do you mind if I go shooting on his property? And they had been really pushing me to get together with him, and which was the only time they ever pushed me to get together with a boy. And they said yes, much to my surprise. So I went over there and we shot rabbits on the property and drove around on his truck and ended up making out and going a little bit further that night. And it had really felt like I had been chosen by someone. I had finally, had this guy that wanted to be with me and liked me. And I was so excited and all of these things. And then he went back to Texas for a couple of weeks before Korea. And all of a sudden I find out, oh, he has a girlfriend in Texas. And he's telling me he's going to break up with her for me. And that takes months to happen. So that was really hard because I felt extremely guilty about that. I felt embarrassed about that. It was that I had gotten that attention. So that had felt like love. And then all of a sudden there was this loss of that. And bringing in that shame again, and a big time sexual shame of I had just done all of this with him sexually, and now I'm feeling like I shouldn't have, and it was just very embarrassing. But eventually he does break up with her, goes to Korea, and we're still constantly texting. He's gone for 9 months, texting and talking the entire time, asks me over text to be his girlfriend. Majority of our relationship happened over text. We didn't even talk on the phone very much during his time in Korea. It was very much like I had this online boyfriend, but I knew him. I'd seen him. I'd been with him, but it was emotionally being catfished the entire time. And once he and I started dating, I lost my entire identity. I became his girlfriend, and that was it. That was who I was. And, he would come home after Korea and visit, and we would go out on these dates. And they were typical dates. We would go to dinner or we would go to the movies, but we'd only have time because, again, of his rigid family structure. His mom, understandably, would take the entire week to spend time with him and would get very upset if he did not spend all of his time with her. But she did not like me for any reason, just other than the fact that I was his girlfriend. So she wouldn't want me involved in their hangouts. So we wouldn't have much time together. So go to dinner, go to the movies, and then he'd drop me off at home. And then we'd be back to texting. And it wasn't until, a couple visits into our relationship that I started to spend the night over there. And it was at his parents' house, and we weren't even asking permission. It was just letting them know, like, oh, Kris is going to be here tonight. And his parents, understandably, did not like that, which really only made the draws in between me and his mom especially worse. And it also made me feel like I had something to prove, that, like, okay, I understand you don't like this aspect, the fact that I'm here, but I'm such a likable person. Like, I was, again, seeking that validation, seeking those affirmations, because that's what I had learned to do my entire life. And, like, I felt like I just had to prove to her that I'm such a likable person. And if you just see me for enough times and talk to me enough times, you'll understand that. And he would tell me that too. And he would tell me, she'll love you eventually. She does really like you. She just does it in a weird way. And it never happened. She never liked me. She openly disliked me to this day. And that's fine. But at the time, I wanted that approval so bad. After a couple of visits, though, he started to form this pattern where we would get super close the weeks leading up to his visit. We would be talking about how much we miss each other, how much we love each other, how we're going to spend all this time together, how, mom be damned, we're spending these 2 weeks together as a couple. And then his first week back from his visit, he just wouldn't text me. He would not communicate with me at all. His plane would land and he would tell me his plane would land. And then it's like he shut off his phone and threw it in the trash can for the first week. And then after that first week, he would text me and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I was building a barn. Or, I was doing this, doing that, whatever. And then would want to hang out and go on dates again. And it was this intermittent reinforcement of our closeness, and just the push and pull, the pushing me away and then hoovering me back in, kept reinforcing these bonds that I had to him of like, oh no, he does actually want me there. He was just so busy, which I don't know what he was doing during those weeks where he wasn't talking to me. I still had no idea. We were also a very tumultuous relationship because we were so young and so long distance, and I was so inexperienced with relationships. We would break up all the time. It was very dramatic, but we would break up and then continue talking the next day and then get back together. And he would push me away and pull me back because usually he was the one breaking up with me. And, it was just this constant pattern of push and pull. So, especially, there was one Christmas that he came home and visited, and again was just dark for an entire week. and then later blamed a project with his mom. So it was just the start of the gaslighting. He did that a couple of different times, and always as soon as he texted me, he would want me to come over. We would have sex, and everything would be made up and everything would be fine. Except this specific one, I was so embarrassed afterwards because we're young and stupid, and I had my whole chest was just bruised up and covered in bite marks and whatever. I roll my eyes to think about it now. But I was only at his house for about an hour, and then he dropped me off back at home. And as soon as I walked in, my mom was like, "Oh, I thought you were going to be gone all day." And I was like, "Yeah, he had to go with his dad to this other town and take care of this thing. And, he's busy today, whatever, but we're hanging out tonight." And then he immediately, it's like the door closed. I'm inside. I had just started making breakfast, and like my eggs weren't even cooked yet. That little bit of time. And he texts me and he breaks up with me. And like I said, there's evidence that he was there on my body, and I was so embarrassed. And I was like, he's never making me feel that way again. We're never doing this again. I'm done with him. I'm tired of this. And deleted his number, blocked his number, whatever. A couple of months go by. I hadn't blocked him on everything. I just blocked his phone number. A couple of months go by, and he sends me a follow request on Instagram and starts talking to me on Instagram and pulls me back in that way. So again, that hoovering, even though by that point I had moved on, I was over it, pulls me right back in, right back to where we were. And, I was really hoping that during that time he had matured and figured himself out a little bit. And so he was coming home the next month. And so I get into a relationship with him again. And I told my parents, "Oh, I'm talking to him again." And I actually get kicked out of my parents' house, and I call him, and I'm in this absolute panic because I have nowhere to go. And, a lot of my close friends at the time had moved away for college, and the people that I did have in town, they still live with their parents, and their parents didn't want to get involved. And so he jumps in and he's my savior, and he puts me up in a hotel room for a couple of days, and he makes this whole big deal about how he actually ended up going negative in his bank account because he's paying for my hotel, and he sent me money for food and all of these things to give me time to cool off, give my parents time to cool off. And it he was the savior to the problem that he made. And not just that, but it strengthened this trauma bond to him, where now when I went back to my parents' house, I was set on, "You guys just kicked me out and he took care of me. You didn't take care of me. I'm going to be with him." And it became set in stone, and it became, my heels were dug, and I was just determined in my mind to be with him. So we kept it went right back to the cycle. We kept dating long distance. He'd drop out and come back and cycle in again and again. And we did this for another year until late in the winter, and there was a military ball, and he paid for me to come out and visit him for the military ball. And then the next month he came home on a visit, and then the month after that he brought me out there for a visit. So I was excited because in these last 3 months we spent a little more than 3 weeks together, and that's the most time we've spent together our entire relationship. And of course, when you're spending 4 days here at a time, 4 days here at a time, and then a 2 chunk at a time, of course, everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows and wonderful. And he's on vacation mode, and I'm on vacation mode, and we're just having this great time. But on the second visit, towards the very, very end of the visit, he proposes to me. And it was a very low effort proposal. I was 20 years old. It was not the proposal that I had ever dreamed of, but I never expected to be proposed to. I had so much shame and so much self-hatred from growing up, and then these cycles would really only continue that narrative of, you're not going to get picked, you're not going to get chosen, you're not going to get loved. that I accepted. And I'm like, at this point, he's living in Alaska and he's telling me, I'm going to move you up here and we're going to have this great life and promising me these things. And so now I know that was future faking. And especially after none of those amazing things happened that he was promised, I was always confused. But it was just he was faking this beautiful future with me that was never going to happen. But manipulating me into falling in love with him and becoming what is going to feed his addiction to attention and to affirmation and all of these things. So I came back from that visit, came back engaged, and met with his mom, who still didn't like me. And she flat out told me that they didn't want him to get married this young because I was 20. He was 21 at the time. Didn't want him to get married that young, and especially didn't want him to get married to me. And I just sat there. We were in a Starbucks, and I was like, okay, weird thing to say. I just got engaged last week. Anyways, and continued on the wedding plans. And now I know, like, she didn't have a good reason to dislike me. But it's very hard to continue a relationship if you don't have that family support. And usually that's a warning sign of something. And also now I've learned that 20 is super young to get married. At the time, I felt like an old spinster. I had so much pressure from my family to get married. I had a lot of pressure in my family to move out. And in my family, you either moved out because you joined the military or you moved out because you got married. But no one had moved out to go to college. So I was still living at home. I felt like I couldn't leave because I had to take care of my sisters. And this became my out. This became what will save me. I will be out of my dad's house. I will be in this loving relationship, half of the country away. And I thought things were going to be great. And I was extremely wrong.
So here you are, moving from one abusive place to another. There's this sense of freedom in one way while you're walking into an even worse situation. It's being reinforced by the person that is your abuser, that, number one, they've saved you. This can bring an obligation towards them. And at this point, this seems like a really good deal, being far away from everyone, but this is going to isolate you even further than you were isolated before. And your worth at this point is in their hands. They're the truth teller of your world. And no matter what has occurred so far as his behavior, it has been excused. And I'm not victim blaming here. I'm just saying that on his end, he has seen that everything that he has done has had no consequences. He's able to hoover you back. He has you in his clutches here, and he's in control. And he knows that. You don't really know that. And even though you were having bad feelings about him earlier, the other feelings of the good times and how he makes you feel, plus leaving, is overriding everything else here. Because you do have the feelings that this isn't right. It's just that these other feelings are so strong and they override everything. And there's the intermittent reinforcement. So you're getting kind of that good part is what you want. And you know that feeling. And the bad feeling, when you do feel it, is bad. But now you kind of have that good feeling that can be attached to it, plus leaving, and that's 66% to 34%.
It was an out of my dad's house, and that was something I wanted so much. So even though I was giving up a lot, moving away from a lot, all I wanted was that out. And I, he had painted this picture of a beautiful future together, and I thought that's what we were getting, and I was so excited for it. And very quickly after, I realized that was just manipulation, and that wasn't what it was going to be. And, I was out of the frying pan and into the fire.
So you move to Alaska. What happens from here?
I did. So, got married to him first. We got engaged. And then within 2 months, we had our wedding. He was military. That was his next leave block. And that was all the planning time we had. It was very controlled by his family. They were the ones paying for it. And his mom and dad had gotten married in a park, like a really small ceremony. And she didn't ever get the big wedding that she wanted. So she wanted to give me a big wedding, but it was her big wedding. So lots of issues during that. I wasn't happy with really any aspect of our wedding, but I was like, as long as we get married at the end of the day, I don't care. And so one of the big things, one of the first times that my eyes opened at like, who is this guy? What are you doing right now? Was during our first dance. I love music. I come from my family's very into music. We've always playing music. It's a family. And so a big deal to me was our first dance. And so we get in there, we're doing our first dance, and I had spent majority of our planning time going through songs and just mulling over what would be the perfect first dance song. And we're out there and we're sweating, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my husband now. I'm so excited. And he the entire time is going, I'm gonna go sit down. I'm done dancing. I want to go sit down. And I'm like, dude, it's a 3-minute song. You can make this work. Like, just stay out here. This is what we're supposed to do for our first dance. Just enjoy it. No, I want to go sit down. And so I end up convincing him, like, please come on, please stay out here with me. This is a moment for me. And the fact that he knew it was a moment for me immediately makes him want to take it away from me, because that is such a narcissist thing to do. And he really minimized emotions that I was having during that time, and was telling me like, it's not that big of a deal. Let's come on, let's go sit down. And yes, it was. To me, it was. And then he got upset with me after that. And we were bickering at our wedding, at our reception. We were bickering. And I have this picture of him. We were taking pictures in front of his family's tractors, and he has his arm wrapped around my neck, and he was pushing on it just just enough for discomfort during the pictures. And I'm grabbing his arm in the picture because I just told him like, "Hey, get off my neck! What are you doing?" And he was pushing on it just enough to make me a little bit uncomfortable right in front of all of our friends and family and the photographer. And that was just a little peek of the emotional abuse, the physical abuse, what was to come. Because if I made him upset, would basically get punished in these weird physical ways. So after that, he went back to Alaska. We did not have housing ready for us yet. So it took a couple of weeks, but by the end of June, I moved up to Alaska, and I was about a week out from my 21st birthday. I had no job, money, nothing. So he paid for my ticket. He bought me a car. He bought me a phone. He bought me all of these things that I felt like I had to be so grateful for. And, now I've learned after leaving that relationship, that is just a partnership. That is just what you do for the person that you are married to. They do not owe you anything because you got your wife a phone in 2016 when you need to have a phone. You got her a car when you live in Alaska, and you can't walk anywhere during the winter, and I had to get to work. Like, you can appreciate, but you don't need to overwhelmingly be thanking them and be groveling at them because they did what they should have. to be in a relationship with you and for you to be a functional person when you're living, 1,000 miles away from any other support that you would have. So I became really isolated in Alaska. I obviously didn't know anyone moving out there. And a big rule that he had for me is that I wasn't allowed to be friends with anyone who was not married, and specifically was not married to a service member. We were a military family. We were to be friends with other military families. And he would tell me if I tried to make friends when I did get a job with the girls that I worked with that were either single or had non-military husbands, they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand the life. Or if I tried to make friends with a single woman, she's going to want to go out to bars all the time. And you're a married woman. You don't do that. So it was a lot of exerting control, a lot of telling me what I can and cannot do. And he wouldn't phrase it as, "Oh, I'd prefer you not do this." It was, "You are not allowed to." I very quickly realized that my new life of freedom that I was so excited for has even more rules than, my life with my dad that I was trying so hard to escape. So I got a retail job that was super crappy because he would not allow me to work any sort of food service job. And then he decided that I needed to get a better job outside of retail. So I was lifeguarding and just trying my best to follow these rules and appease him. But every time I met the new goalpost, it was moved once again, and nothing ever felt like it was good enough for him. So things continued to escalate when we were living in Alaska. And that's when the physical abuse really started, and then slowly continued to amp up. The first experience that I had of it was about 3 weeks after we got married. He was getting ready to go to the field. So we had only been living together for about 2 weeks at this point. And I love doing things for my partner. I love little surprises. And so his favorite candy was Reese's peanut butter cups. And so I slipped one into his bag, and it was just supposed to be a nice surprise for when he's out in the field and, they're camping out there and eating MREs and it sucks. Here's your favorite candy as a little surprise. And like wrote "I love you" on it, and like, just trying to make him happy. And he found that in his pack while he was getting everything in there, and he got upset because I should have known that putting this candy in his pack was going to attract a bear to them while they were outside. And he like yelled at me and asked me if I wanted him to get mauled by a bear. So, obviously that wasn't my intention. And I had lived in California my whole life and lived in the city. I had no idea about bear safety. And he threw it at me, and it hit me in the mouth and gave me a fat lip. And after that, like, he did not apologize. He did not mention it again. He just kind of moved on from that. And I sat there and I was trying to rationalize it to myself. And I said, like, well, he didn't mean to hit me in the mouth with it. He didn't mean to give me a fat lip with it. He just threw it at me, but he didn't mean to hurt me with it. And, tried to make the space safe for myself again, even as these things were starting. And then, yeah, it continued. It went from throwing things at me to, then he was breaking near me. And there was one time that we were sitting out in the garage, and he was a mechanic, like as a hobby, and he was putting a seal on the car mirror on the outside. I don't remember what they're called, but he was putting a new seal on that mirror. And the entire rest of our relationship said that the mirror broke. I don't know. I couldn't see it. But what I did see was him just flip it out of his hands, like he was just tossing like a baseball or something up. Flipped it out of his hands right on the floor. He did that right next to me. I get covered in broken glass. I got cut by the broken glass. And immediately I'm like, what the hell? And like got up and I I yelled because I was surprised and I was scared and I was bleeding. And then he started yelling back at me louder that he just accidentally dropped it and why am I getting mad at him? And it was an accident. And I was like, I watched you throw it up in the air. There's no way that, that was an accident. And he kept insisting it was. So it was that gaslighting starting again and continuing and getting worse. And, our entire time in Alaska, it just little things like that continued. And I would rationalize it to myself. I'm like, well, he threw something at me, but he didn't hit me. So it wasn't abusive. And he, threw this mirror and it dropped and it broke on me. But like, again, he didn't hit me. So it wasn't abuse. And now I know that abuse and even physical abuse comes in so many more forms than just being hit. But at 21 years old, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. And I thought it only looked one way.
So, right here, you're in Alaska. You have future faking brought you to Alaska. When the wedding happens, you have emotional minimization going on. The first dance being cut short. You're now there. There's coercive control, the beginnings of it, no autonomy. You're kind of really kept in a little prison there without realizing it because it feels free in some manner because you're away from your family. Social isolation going on. Now we have a form of physical abuse going on, blame shifting going on, minimization of it, denial of it, gaslighting going on here, and things have escalated here. You've gone there, you're isolated, and now you're getting incidences like this where things are that might not seem that they're big, but there's these incremental steps going on that is taking you further away from where you were at the beginning or who you are at the beginning, and this is just the beginning. So after this happens, eventually he does get a deployment. So tell me about what happens after the deployment.
So the deployment happened. He went to Afghanistan for 9 months and he was infantry. So obviously I was so stressed and so worried about my husband. And it was really upsetting because now I'm really truly alone. I had some friends, but I wasn't super close with any of them. I really felt alone. But then I made a friend with one of my coworkers. She was a single woman. She lived in Alaska and moved up there on her own accord and was just living her life and doing whatever she wanted. She and I became friends. And within a very short amount of time, I realized with him being gone and me being on my own for the first time, this sense of freedom that I had and this sense of self that I gained over those 9 months, I was able to establish my own little routine. I'd go to work, go to the gym, go hang out at my girlfriend's house, and we would have our dogs there and drink wine together and watch so much Grey's Anatomy and just have girl time and have fun and, really got to see who I am as a person, not as a daughter, not as a wife, just me by myself. And it was really conflicting because I enjoyed that time so much. But at the same time, I was constantly being reminded by my husband how terrible of a time he's having in Afghanistan, how stressful of a time it is over there. And then also every time I am enjoying something, I'm doing fun or it's something fun. In the back of my mind, there's a little voice saying that I should not be having this fun because he's having such a terrible time. But my friend that I had, her life, she lived in a certain way. And so it continued on. My life was meshing with hers in a lot of ways. She liked to host parties, and, they weren't these blackout rager, everyone going crazy parties. It was everyone getting together and having a couple of drinks and just a little hangout. We're going to play Mario Kart on the TV, and if you lose, you have to take a shot, sort of thing. And so we were doing a lot of those, and we were just making the best out of a very stressful time in my life. And anytime we would have these parties, something would happen with my ex in Afghanistan. He would call me and, they were taking mortar fire or something. And it's interesting to me now that every single time we were hosting some sort of event with our friends, something happened in Afghanistan those nights and those nights only. So who knows what actually happened in Afghanistan? He knows, and that's the only person that does. But to me, it feels like a lot of emotional manipulation. It feels like more control of I can't be having a good time unless he's having a good time, and he's not having a good time, so I'm not allowed to have a good time. And it really took a lot of the joy out of things that I'm a very social person. I love hosting, and it took a lot of my joy out of that. And that really sucks to look back on those memories that should be fun memories for me. There was also a lot of arguments back and forth about money. He was getting paid a lot extra while he was in Afghanistan, and I was trying to save up as much money as I could for when he got back. We could go on vacation, we could go do something fun, we can do something to make those 9 months not as terrible. He would have something good to look forward to. And so I saved $30,000 while he was gone, and I was pinching pennies. I was not buying anything extra. I was, doing everything that I felt like I should to make it good for him at the very end, at least. And within 2 months of him coming back, those savings were drained. He, all of a sudden, the gun that he's dreamed about owning has come up on sale, and he has to go buy it. So I need to transfer him $3,500 so he can go buy this gun that he's wanted since he was a child. And he would do these things where he would go buy a gun during the day, and I would be working at the pool, and he would come to me while I was at work in front of my coworkers, which we only had 6 people on staff. So it was a very small staff. We all knew each other. We all knew all of each other's business. And we were all friends outside of the pool. And he would come in and in front of whoever I was working with, be like, "Oh, don't be mad at me, but I bought another gun." And I was like, "Hey, we had plans with that money. We wanted to do something fun for both of us. Like, why are you buying a gun to shoot giraffes when we live in Alaska and we're never going to live somewhere with giraffes? Why are you buying that?" And so I would get mad at him about it. And then, of course, it would get flipped back onto me that I'm being the problem because this is his money. He made the money. He was in Afghanistan for that money. Do I not understand what he went through to make that money? However he wants to spend it, he can spend it, all of those sorts of things. And, I felt bad when he would say those things to me because technically it was true. It was his money. He did go off to Afghanistan for it, but it wasn't the agreement that we had come to. And I was also the one living very frugally to be able to put this money away for him. So we did end up taking a vacation. We went to Disney World on his next leave, and it's the happiest place on earth, the most magical place on earth. It was the most miserable vacation I have ever went on. I was so excited. This was the first time that I had really planned a trip and booked the hotel room and the rental car and everything. And just nothing was good enough for him. He hated our hotel room. He was really close with one of my best friends from home. She ended up coming on the trip with us for a couple of days, and she flew out there, met us out there. And then my best friend from Alaska, he wanted her to come on the trip with us. So she came too. So it was me and 2 of my friends and him. And everything that they did was upsetting to him. He had just been mortared and shot at, and we're going somewhere with fireworks. And we know that's a huge trigger for veterans. So we didn't think about that. And he was having a hard time with that. But I remember there was one night that, it wasn't even while there were fireworks. We were waiting in the line, and he was upset by the fact that the line was taking so long. And he was playing on his phone and took his regular, it wasn't an iPhone, but it was, set up the same way where it's a screen. And he just grabbed it and folded it in half. And that was really embarrassing in front of my friends. That was the first outburst he had in front of people, really. And I was just mortified. And then, of course, the fog of his anger wears off on him. And now the next day of our vacation that I've planned all of these things for, my two friends can go off and go have fun, but I have to go with him. We have to go find a store here to go buy him a new phone and take care of that instead. So instead of being able to have any excitement over this thing that I planned, it once again was about him. And it was just more of those physical outbursts. Very embarrassing stuff. He also started to drink a little bit more during this time. We were young. We had always enjoyed drinking, but everyone came back from Afghanistan, not the same. So our whole group of friends, the guys that were in the military, all came back and all really wanted to party. And so we would be at parties, and like there was one in particular where I had gotten off of work late. I show up to this party and he is already hammered. Everyone else is hammered. Everyone's drunk there. And the guy who was hosting the party is like, "Oh, come take a shot with me." And I was like, "Oh no, I have to drive us home tonight." And he was like, "Oh, you guys can just stay here. We have a guest bedroom." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna run home and I'll grab my dogs real quick and we'll bring them over here because our dogs played all the time and we can just hang out and drink here and stay the night here." So I run home. It's a military base. So this whole trip takes me about an hour. I run home. I was a little embarrassed because I had come in like leggings and a hoodie, and all the other girls were dressed up cute for a party. So I changed my clothes real quick, put some mascara on, let my hair down, grabbed the dogs, drove back over across space. And I get there and I'm like, "All right, let's take a shot." And my ex immediately grabs my arm and is like, "No, come on, we're going." And I'm confused because I don't know what just happened in the hour that I was gone, but something must have happened. Okay, whatever, let's go. So we get into a car, and this is when the accusations of cheating had really ramped up. And he immediately starts laying into me, "Where the fuck were you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? I went home. Like, the dogs are with me right now. I'm wearing a different outfit than I was an hour ago. I think it's kind of obvious where I went." And he was drunk and he was just insistent that I had gone and cheated on him. And I was like, "Every man that I know on on the military base is in that room right there. Like, I don't know anyone to cheat on me with. I'm not going to cheat on you. That's not who I am." I went home, I got cute, I came back, and he's like, "Well, why'd you dress up?" I was like, "Because all the other girls were dressed up and I wanted to look cute." And so he was just stuck on me cheating, insisted on me cheating. And, he ends up sleeping in our bed. I went and slept in the guest bed. And the next morning he came in and he was trying to snuggle up with me. And I was like, "Dude, do you remember what you said last night?" "Oh, no, I don't. Sorry. I was so drunk." And maybe he blacked out. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But that was the trigger for all of a sudden it got in his mind that I was cheating. And so now all of the accusations became about cheating. If I laughed at another man's joke in front of him, it was him grabbing me by the arm and pulling me somewhere else and telling him, "Can you not," or him telling me, "Can you not try to fuck him in front of me?" And I was like, "I- I'm just being friendly. I just like to talk to people." So there was another layer of that added on, and it continued like that for the rest of our time in Alaska. And then all of a sudden one day he came home and he told me, "Oh, I'm getting out of the military." And I was like, "Okay, when are you getting out?" And he had about 2 months left. And so now I have to scramble to figure out, where are we going? What are we doing? Like, Everything is in shambles in this point. Our relationship was really rocky. I had just figured out who I was. And now that he was back, I had to put myself back in the box of being his wife. And that was really hard for me to do. Everything was just very up in the air about whether or not we were going to stay together. And so I told him that I would like to go back to California. And he told me no, because if we go back to California, I will talk with my family and they will convince me to get a divorce from him. And he does not want that. So we did not go to California. The friend that I had been working with and had been best friends with and had continued hanging out with, he started running a smear campaign about her, about what a terrible friend she was, and how she didn't listen to me, how she didn't like him, how she didn't want us to stay married, even though she had never said anything like that to me. And it became this thing where I was just willing to give things up for it to be easier with him. So when all the accusations of cheating were happening, I resolved myself to not talking to men, because if I don't talk to men, he's not going to think that I'm cheating, and that'll make things easier on me. And then when he started running this smear campaign against my friends, I let go of that friendship, which I still regret to this day. I really miss that friendship. I feel really bad how I acted, but I let go of it because it would be easier with him, and I had a fear of his anger at this point, so I was willing to let go of whatever it took to make him happy, to keep him calm, to placate him, and to make sure that he does not get mad at me. So he decided he wanted to move to Texas. Okay, cool. Let's go to Texas. His family had owned property. He decided that he's always wanted to own property. So we bought 10 acres in Texas, and we bought it in bumfuck nowhere, Texas. The town that we live in is about 14,000, and it is the biggest town for about an hour before you get to Abilene. And then Abilene is bigger, but it is a small town. You cannot go to the store without running into someone you know. I'm a teacher now, which is torturous because I can't go anywhere, do anything without running into one of my students. So there weren't very many opportunities here. I hadn't gotten my degree yet. We didn't really have much that we could do. We once again moved halfway across the country with no job, no money, no plan. I ended up, the day we got to Texas, we arrived here at about 2 o'clock in the morning. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had a job, and he had just gotten out of the military. And so he made this decision that he didn't want to work anymore, and he wanted to take some time before he got a job. So I was working 14-hour days. My job was very stressful to me. I was working with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The people who can do that job are absolute angels. I have so much respect for anyone that works with IDD. I had a really hard time doing it. I was caring and loving, but it just wasn't the job for me. But we had to buy groceries. We had to pay bills. We had to take care of things. And I was the only one working. So I stuck in that job. And eventually I got an offer to be a corrections officer at a boys' juvie. So switched there, and I'm working super hard, and again, working these 60+ hour weeks, and I'm getting home at 9 o'clock at night, and I'm ready to eat dinner, shower, and go to bed so I can get up and do it all again the next day. So I'm working 6, 7 days a week, every week. I get home at 9 o'clock, and I'm like, okay, what'd you have for dinner? I'll eat some leftovers. And nothing. He didn't eat anything for dinner. He waited until I got home to eat. And the entire responsibility of working and paying bills and taking care of the house and cooking for us, everything was my responsibility. And he was just screwing around on the property all day. And when I would get mad about that, he would say, like, well, I fixed the entire fence line today. So what did you expect me to do? We continued on the property. I would go out and help him, and we would be working for 4 hours. Which, don't get me wrong, it was hard work. Being a farmer is hard work. I'm gone for 12 hours. So you still had 8 hours to make yourself some dinner, to make me a quesadilla. I'm getting off at 9 o'clock. Start making a quesadilla at 9 o'clock. Give me something nice to come home to since I'm the only one taking care of things. So I'm working in a predominantly male industry, and he has never showed an interest in being a corrections officer. And he decides all of a sudden, out of the blue, that he wants to become a corrections officer as well. He wants to get a job at my work. So he starts working with me. And I was very insistent that I never want us on the same dorm as each other. I do not want us working together. I want to have that distance, not even because I don't want to be near him, but because I don't want there to be any sort of rumors of anything inappropriate happening between he and I during work hours, because we worked with teenage boys. That's all they had on the mind. And they loved to spread rumors about staff, regardless one way or another. I didn't even tell the kids. We went by different last names. I did not tell the kids that we were married. Very insistent on keeping that life totally separate.
So before we talk about your pregnancy, you're getting like a triangulation going on with the smear campaign. You have financial abuse going on and 30K savings on guns. There's accusations of you cheating. So that in itself is kind of keeping you on your back foot right there. Hard to kind of charge forward when someone's accusing you of things. They're keeping you there, they're projecting on you there. And now you have this stuff at work where you have your own job, you have freedom there, even though it's in a facility. And now he wants to be inside there with you as a watchdog. You're surrounded by men or boys, and this is not a good scenario to be in right here, where he could come up with anything he wants to. You looked at this person, things like who knows what can happen, but it's not a good spot because now he's around all the time. He knows the inner workings of your day, or he thinks he will know the inner workings of your day because he's going to now possibly accuse you of anything. So, here's just now like another step of things gradually taking another step of control, coercive control, and from the ability earlier of, okay, this person can physically abuse me, to guns. And your world is becoming, when he wants to be away, he can be away, but when he wants to tighten that grip, he's tightening that grip. So now you're in this tight grip, and now you're going to get pregnant, which, if your grip wasn't tighter before, it's now going to get even tighter. So tell us what happens from here.
Yeah. So we were both working at the juvie, and we've been talking about having a baby since he got back from Afghanistan. And it was about 2.5 years after that at this point. And we had been trying and just not succeeding. And, my doctors are telling me I'm perfectly healthy and have zero issues. And now I believe that it was so much of the stress that I was under that was preventing pregnancy. But we did end up getting pregnant, and it was miserable for me. I had morning sickness the entire time, and then I'm working. We had switched companies in the middle of my pregnancy. So my days went from being 8 to 12 hours to 14-hour days. And that was when I was halfway through my pregnancy. So I think about 4 months along. So I'm 4 months pregnant. I can't think about chicken without throwing up. Like, I'm miserable, I'm exhausted, and I'm on my feet for 14 hours a day. And I was incredibly fulfilled in that job. I enjoyed that job so much. I was exhausted at the end of every day. And, it was really hard because I had always expected that me being pregnant would bring out some sort of softness within him. I'd always hoped that. And something I've learned throughout all of this is that a baby should never have a job. You should never, we didn't have our daughter with the intention of fixing our relationship, but I don't think that's something you should do. You should never hope that, this baby will cause him to be softer with you or nicer with you or fix the relationship or whatever. A baby should not have a job. So it did not bring out a softness within him. I was still expected to do all of the farm chores that I had. By this point, we had cows and a donkey and pigs and chickens and dogs and cats, and I was the one taking care of all of them. I was, like I said, working 14-hour days. I was the one who was doing all the cooking and cleaning around the house. I was taking care of everything. So I was ran so far. I was exhausted during that pregnancy. And he, even though he had been the one talking about having a baby and all that along with me, I was a little bit more than halfway through my pregnancy, and I'm in what became my daughter's bedroom, and I was painting it and getting it ready for her. And he comes in and he sits on this windowsill and he tells me, I'm not ready to be a dad. And I was like, well, we're way too late for that. I'm far in this pregnancy that, there's no stopping it now. And she's sticking and we're doing this. And he's like, well, I'm not ready. I don't want to be a dad. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. So he never harmed me during my pregnancy, but there were constant jokes about pushing me down the stairs or, it was always something negative said about my pregnancy. And he would be talking about how great his day was and, how excited he was for whatever and be like, and then I remembered you were pregnant. And I felt bad for being pregnant. Even though we had made this decision together, we had gotten pregnant together, it was a mutual effort in this. I was dealing with this emotional cruelty and guilt for being pregnant like we both wanted. He was also so annoying about it was like the sadistic behavior that he would love to do where he would find out whatever new trigger I would have with food or smells or whatever and just start doing them. There was one day that I opened a jar of pickles and I smelled the vinegar and I immediately threw up and I was like, I cannot do vinegar smells anymore, apparently. And that's what we had always used to clean. And so I told him, like, oh my God, the pickles made me throw up this morning. Vinegar smells terrible to me right now, blah, 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 blah. And like, he knew vinegar smelled bad to me. Well, that night, all of a sudden, randomly, he decided to clean the stove for me after I'd finished cooking dinner. And he brings out a bottle of vinegar and starts spraying it on the stove. And then immediately I threw up again. And like, it was just a very purposeful, very intentional doing things to push my buttons, to make me throw up, any sort of new food thing. He would purposefully do something to make me throw up. Or if my biggest craving during my pregnancy was oranges and chocolate together, which is delicious now, even though I'm no longer pregnant. But my mom sent me this giant box of gummy worms, orange gummy worms dipped in chocolate. And I was so excited. And I was like, this is mine. This sounds so good. I've been like, my mouth was watering when I opened that package and smelled it. And I went to work that day and I came home from work and he had eaten about half as one of the boxes. And I cried because pregnancy hormones are crazy. And I was so upset with him that this was one of my biggest cravings. And he's like, well, you still have so much left. I'm like, I understand. But like, that was mine. My mom sent that to me for me. And we have other snacks in the house. And he just didn't see why it was such a big deal and didn't understand and didn't care to understand. He was also very just emotionally distant the entire pregnancy. I was pregnant during COVID, so we weren't really able to go get any professional portraits done while I was pregnant. But then also, he didn't take any pictures of me during my pregnancy. All of the photos that I have from my pregnancy are just selfies that I took in the mirror for bump dates. And, I would tell him, like, oh, she's kicking right now, or she has hiccups right now, or whatever, she's moving. And I would put his hand on my stomach and push in, and he would freak out and tell me that's disgusting and say that it feels like there's an alien inside of me. And, I really lost, on top of losing, friends and financial security and everything that I lost. I had looked forward my entire life to becoming a mom. I wanted to become a mom so bad. And I lost my ability to have a safe pregnancy and to have a happy pregnancy and to really cherish those memories during my pregnancy. And that's something that, going to therapy and working through the emotional abuse and everything that he's done to me, that's something that never has stopped being a raw wound for me, because it's something that I love my daughter so much. And it just feels like, yeah, I don't understand why he didn't have that love for her as well. So while I was pregnant, he had decided that whatever happens when I gave birth, because he was also very open about the fact that he thought that I was going to die while giving birth to her and would just say that to me. And that was always weird to me. He also decided that I was going to have a tube ligation when I had our daughter. And I always wanted more kids. But again, to placate him, I knew it would be a huge fight if I didn't do it. And I knew also if I ever got pregnant with a second child, it would be absolutely miserable. So when I had my daughter, I got a tube ligation. And so that's just another level of control, of reproductive control, that I'm, I can't undo that. That's something that I have to carry forever, which really sucks, especially now that I'm 30 years old and we're no longer together and I could have another kid, and it's just not going to happen. And I'm making peace with that. But yeah, the day I had my daughter, he and I had gone to work together that morning. And by this point, he had lost his licensing for restraints because he had acted too aggressively during a restraint with a kid. And so he had moved to maintenance. And so I passed out at work during that day. And this was on a Friday. She was breech. And so we had scheduled my C-section to have her on Monday. And so I passed out at work, and my doctor and I had gone into this routine where he would give me an IV if I passed out, and then I'd go back to work. But this time I called him, and my blood pressure right after I had passed out was super, super low. And then when I took it again a little bit later, it was super, super high. And so he was a little bit concerned about that. And so he wanted me to come into his office to be monitored for a little bit. And so I went to my husband's office and let him know what the doctor said, and let my husband know that I had just passed out again. And he tossed me the keys and said, okay, well, I'm busy here, so you can drive yourself. And so I'm 9 months pregnant, just passed out. My blood pressure's all over the place. And I drove myself to my doctor's appointment. And when I get to my doctor was absolutely pissed because he was telling me all of the dangers of that and everything that could happen to me in that, 10-minute drive. And I'm like, well, he didn't want to drive me, so I had to get here one way or another. Sorry. And while I was there, he asked me if I wanted to just call it today and, in the pregnancy today, have her today. And when you're 9 months pregnant, the answer is yes. There is no other option. So I said, of course. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go back to work and pick up my husband, and then we'll drive over to the hospital and we'll meet you there and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, you are not leaving my office. You are not driving. He needs to come pick you up. I was like, well, we drove together today, so he doesn't have a car. And he's like, I don't care. You are not safe to drive right now. You should not have driven over here. Your life is in danger. He needs to come pick you up. And so I had to call my ex and tell him, like, hey, you know how you just had me drive across town? The doctor's mad at both of us, so you need to come over here. He's not letting me leave. I'm sorry, you need to figure out a ride. And, he was really upset with me for not being able to drive and pick him up. And I was like, my doctor isn't letting me leave. I don't know what to tell you. So he gets a ride over there. We go to the hospital. I have my daughter. The birth was terrible for some reason. The pain meds that they gave me did not work on me. And so they gave me a spinal, gave me an epidural. Neither of them worked. So they had to put me completely under. And then when I woke up from my C-section, like I said, the pain meds didn't work. So I woke up from a C-section with no pain meds in my system. It was just terrible. And it was very traumatic for me. And when they gave me pain meds, I passed out. And then when I woke up later, I'm looking at my husband and he's just sitting there. And he's not holding our daughter. He's not acting like anything exciting is just happening. He's not acting like we just had a child. He's just sitting there scrolling through his phone. And so since I had been passed out, I hadn't seen her yet, or they put me under for the C-section. I hadn't seen her yet. I thought she died during childbirth. I was so worried about it, kept putting that in my mind. So I'm like, where's our daughter? And he's like, oh, she's in the nursery. And I'm like, did something happen? Is she okay? I can handle it. Please just tell me. And he's like, no, she's just in the nursery. I just don't want her in here. And I was like, what do you mean you don't want her in here? I just cooked that thing for 9 months. I'm so excited to meet her. What do you mean? He's like, well, I want the nurses to take care of her. You rest, you relax. This is the last time that we're going to have a relaxing time in our life. Just let the nurses take care of her. And I had just woken up. I wanted to meet her so bad. And I had to wait until the nurses came into the room and asked me if I wanted to meet my baby, to be like, yes, please bring her in here. And so they finally brought her in, and she was beautiful and she was perfect. And it was, I forgot about all the crap with him and all the crap of giving birth and everything that happened. I was like, I have this now, and I made this, and I cannot believe I created life. That's amazing. And so, I'm holding her and I'm so excited. And he kept telling me, this baby who is not even 12 hours old yet, he was telling me that I was going to spoil her and that I needed to put her in her bassinet, and the bassinet could stay in the room with us, but she needed to be in her bassinet and I needed to stop holding her. And so I fought him for a little bit and I kept holding her. And then eventually I did, because it started to get upset. So I put her in the bassinet, and, they ended up taking her out, taking her back to the nursery. And I was just so upset because all I wanted to do was to hold that baby. And all of a sudden, the nurses are coming in, they're checking up on me. My heart rate is still being all over the place. They're having to massage my uterus to get the rest of my placenta out. There are nurses constantly coming in and checking up on me, and only me. And I don't like that sort of thing. I'm trying to be as calm as I can throughout it. I'm trying to be the easiest patient in the hospital, basically. And all of a sudden, his stomach starts hurting. And so all of this attention goes from being on me to everyone's going over, and the nurses are checking up on him. And he had food poisoning, despite the fact that he and I, over the last several weeks, everything that he had eaten, I had also eaten, and I'm feeling totally fine. He has this terrible food poisoning now, and he's throwing up and is laying down, and he's feeling like he's about to pass out. He's not sweating, he's not pale, he's not clammy, his temperature, everything is fine, but the attention was completely taken off of me and my daughter and put onto him for the rest of that hospital stay until he decided he felt better. So we go home from the hospital, and I had told my parents because this was October 2020, so it was still COVID time. And I had told my parents, my friends, everyone, we're not going to have visitors. As soon as she gets home, we're going to wait a little bit. I'm still a little nervous. And we get home, and who was sitting in our driveway but his parents visiting from California? And apparently they had planned it with him, and he had just failed to mention that to me. And they came and they stayed with us our first night home. That I was so excited for a first night as a family of three, sitting across from his mom at the table, and her and I are bickering, and it was just every possible moment that could have been a highlight for me was smeared by something. The control continued through the rest of our relationship. Shortly after my daughter was born, I decided that I wanted to be better and that I still had a lot of issues with my parents. And looking at my daughter, who babies are just, they're so pure, and they just, only good things have ever happened to babies. Hopefully. Hopefully. And I did not want to be the first bad thing that happened to her. So I decided to start therapy. And therapy led me to having this cognitive awakening and started to dissect parts of my past and the abuse that I had went through with my father, and it, just everything, all the terrible things that happen living in a household with an angry man in it. I started to really go through all of that, and come to find out later, he tells people, "Oh, that's when Kris stopped being fun." Because I stopped taking his abuse laying down. I had lost my friends. I had lost my body autonomy. I had lost financial security. He had started pressuring me not to talk to my mom or my sister if I needed advice and only go to him. I was losing my family because of that. And I started to wake up and realize that, like, he doesn't need to be my truth teller. I can be my own truth teller. I can have other people as a support system outside of him. So his control was able to hide through this obligation that I felt towards him. And it was supposed to be love, but it was so low effort. And it was so isolating. And I have learned that being isolated like that, not being allowed to talk to friends, family, anyone, that is never an accidental thing. That is a purposeful thing that someone is choosing to do. And he definitely chose to do it too.
How you doing?
I'm okay. It's this, what we're about to get to is like all of the cheating and all of the horrible behaviors that he has a parent towards our daughter. And it's the stuff that I'm still in therapy working towards and is still very fresh to me. So anything with my daughter, she's 5 years old. She is the best kid in the world. She is everything to me and then some. And so the way that he treated her as a baby, the way that he treats her now is so hard for me to like emotionally deal with, because I have so much guilt about not saving her from my childhood. And that's something that trying to be able to talk through it without crying, but it's hard for me.
And when you're ready, talk about the moment when you're going to start to realize that you need to leave this relationship and everything that goes into that.
So I did a year of therapy straight, and that therapist was an amazing therapist for that time, where we did this, we called it a trauma timeline. And it was this checklist, and it was so sad of, have you ever experienced sexual abuse or financial abuse or this type of abuse or that type of abuse? And I'm going, yes. Okay, when? My husband just drain 30 grand from our bank account. I wake up frequently to him having sex with me. He's throwing things at me, and I'm laying this all out for my therapist. And this is our first session, and she put her things down and she was like, you need to start doing things to leave that relationship. You should already be out of that relationship. You have a daughter now. You need to get out of that. And started laying out for me, we started connecting everything of my traumas that I experienced in my childhood to my traumas that I'm experiencing now, and realizing the connection between I grew up with an angry father and then I married an angry man. And the only way that is going to continue is if I allow it to continue. And as terrifying as it is to leave, that's going to be my only way out of a house with an angry man in it. So I did therapy for a year. At the end of that year, I signed up for college classes. And I knew that if I spoke to him and asked his opinion about me signing up for college classes, he would not allow it. He would insist that we can't afford it. I was the one who did all of our budgeting and make sure all of our bills were paid on time. I knew the amount extra that we had at the end of every month. I knew we could afford it, and I made it happen. And I applied for college one night and didn't tell him about it until I got the acceptance letter, and was like, okay, I'm starting college in August. I'm going to get a career in education going, and this is what I'm doing now. And that was my first time that I fully pushed back against him and did not let him make that decision for me, and just picked something and went with it. And so I started college, and all of a sudden I was around a ton of other people and had these classmates that I was very friendly with. And the college that I went to was an hour away from our house. So if I had 45 minutes in between classes, that's not enough time for me to drive home and back, but it is enough time for me to go hang out with one of my girlfriends and grab lunch. And so that's what I would do. And he would get upset with me if I went and grabbed lunch, the 2 days that I was on campus. But I was also making money. I had a part-time job during this time. And, I would tell him like, oh, that's what I'm using my paycheck for. And I would pull money out and set it aside and kind of sneak around him, but only sneak around him just to have a connection and a friendship with another person. I was looking for that and seeking that out so much. So it was hard. I was still expected to do the brunt of the parenting as our daughter got older. She was 9 months old when I started college, and she was still waking up throughout the night, and I had to get up and take care of her. And I'm taking between 15 to 21 units in one semester, and parenting a 9-month old, and then working part-time and taking care of a farm and a husband and a house and everything. And I was really overwhelmed, really stressed. It was really hard, but also I had in my mind that I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this. And not only could I do this and pass and get a C, but I could do this and succeed. So I was getting A's and B's. I graduated magna cum laude, and in my final year of college, I got this amazing research grant and was able to do all of this research on coral and microplastics and the ocean, and got to work in a lab and just absolutely loved it. And I've always loved being in a lab. Those were my favorite classes. Even from middle school on, I've always loved science. I'm a science teacher. So I got to be in this amazing place and do it on my own. And it was something that felt like such a safe for me, because he was never going to walk into the room and take this joy from me. And I wanted to share it with him so bad, but I also knew that he would not have the same excitement and interest, and something negative would have been said to take that away from me. And he tried to. When I got that research grant, that was specifically towards my school entering the Emerging Researchers National Convention in STEM. This was our first time as a school entering it, and I was the only one that got this grant out of my entire school. And I applied for the convention, and not only did I get chosen to participate in the convention, but I was chosen to be a paid speaker. And so they flew me out there and paid for my hotel room and gave me a stipend. It was a 3-day, all expenses paid vacation to Washington, D.C. for me to go speak about my research for 10 minutes. And when I got the email stating that is what it was going to be, I was so excited. And this was the first time that I just done this for me and put myself out there. So when I told my ex that I got chosen for this competition and told him it's all expense paid, they will fly me out there and then they will give me a card with money on it as soon as I get there, and we don't have to worry about anything. He told me that I shouldn't go and I can't go because we can't afford it. And I kept telling him that it was free. I kept telling him that we don't have to pay for everything. And he started to guilt me about how much he would miss me, about how much our daughter would miss me, about how I would be gone for so long. So it wasn't even a conversation about my hopes and dreams and whether or not I wanted it, because he was not the one being the primary parent. It was more so, you're not leaving me with this kid. He did not think what I was doing was important, or, I recorded my speaking that I did, and he had no interest in watching it. He watched a little bit and just sat there scrolling through, fast forwarding. Oh, you're just talking the entire time? Okay, that's boring. And really minimizing what I had just done, the work I had just done, the excitement I had for this, everything that I had did. So I finished up college. By this point, was really emotionally numb. So there was one night that it happened like 3 times this week, and it was my very last semester of college. There was one night that he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm going to talk on the phone with my dad tonight. I don't want you to be home for it." And that was not an uncommon thing. If he was talking to his parents, either I wasn't allowed to be in the house, or he would go into another room and lock the door. I now have found out that a lot of that was him cheating on me, but I did not know that during the time. So he told me, "You need to go do something for a couple of hours, take our daughter, be out of the house for a couple of hours tonight." And so I said, "Okay." And I went to this crappy little Italian restaurant that we have in town, and she and I sat and ordered pizza, and we played and we colored and we hung out in that booth for about an hour, and then we went to the park after that, and we were at the park for like 2 hours until he called me and told me that we could come home. And I realized while we were sitting at the park, we had gotten ice cream, and I realized that I spend majority of my time with her alone, and I don't need him to be there. And in fact, I prefer when he is not there, because then I can enjoy my time and I can just breathe and laugh with my daughter. And I don't have to sit there and be conscious of his feelings the entire time. So as we were sitting at that park, I decided that I was done. I decided that after I finished up my degree, that I only had a little bit of time left on, I was going to leave, and we were just going to have to figure out co-parenting and divorce life, and I'm going to have to, be alone for the first time in my life. So I got my return for my student loans, and it was again that financial abuse came up again. I told him that I wanted to keep that money for when my family was visiting for my graduation and be able to have a fun visit and go do things with them and not have to worry about money during that time. And then that very night, a truck came up for sale that was the exact same amount as my student loan return. And so we had to go out that night, and he was guilting me for the fact that my car had air conditioning and, he wanted to drive something nicer. And so we went and bought this truck that night, and come to find out that truck didn't have air conditioning, and it was a POS as well, but it was a truck that he said he had always wanted. And that truck ended up just sitting on our property and not moving until the day he sold it. He did not drive it. He did not use it. It was just using my student loan money. And then my graduation happened. My parents and one of my sisters came for it. And I was extremely proud of myself. I was very excited, very proud of it. Afterwards, I really wanted to take some pictures with my family and, with my husband and with my daughter. And I wanted it to be a big deal that I had, at this point, a 3-year-old, and I had just graduated college with honors. And with all of these cords and all of these things for all of the different things that I had done during college. And I'm out there waiting to take pictures, and he stays around for about 5 minutes and then tells me that the crowds are too bad for him and he's too anxious and he can't take pictures and he has to go right now and take our daughter. So he grabbed her and he left. And it was just another moment of, some sort of joy, some sort of excitement, something that was about me that he just could not accept and had to leave. So during this visit with my sister, after it, she told me that I needed to leave him. He didn't do anything for my graduation. I ended up going to bed the night of my graduation at like 8 o'clock at night because I was like, well, I'm tired and we're not doing anything anyways. So whatever. And at that point, I was so used to not getting gifts for birthdays or anniversaries or holidays or anything that I didn't even expect anything. But I was still disappointed. And after their visit, he and I sat down and we had a discussion about how our relationship was, and we decided that we wanted to get a divorce. And I felt so conflicted after that conversation because I went into my bedroom and I closed the door and I was giddy. I was just giggling because I just kept saying to myself, "Oh my God, I'm getting out." And it was amazing to me and crazy to me that I was getting out what felt like unscathed. And I felt like I was just being let go. And he was just going to open the door and I could walk out. And I was like, this feels like another shoe is going to drop. I don't even care right now. I'm done. And so I continued on, and I had a really good friend leading up to this that all of a sudden one day he went from really liking this friend to running a smear campaign on her. And he came to me and he was crying. And he told me that this friend had called him mean and said that he was angry and that he doesn't want me to be friends with her anymore. And again, by this point, I knew it was easier to just not be friends with that person anymore rather than fight him on it. And so I said, okay, and didn't talk to her for a little bit. And then one of her packages got delivered to our house. So I told him that I was going to run over and drop that off with her. And he asked me if I was going to stay and talk with her. And I said, I don't know, probably not. I'll be home in a little bit. So I drop off this package. And then she asked me if I wanted to come inside and talk. And I love talking with people. So of course I did. And when we got inside, she asked me how the divorce process was going. And I was like, what do you mean? We had that conversation a week ago. How did you know about that? Did he tell you about that? And she's like, oh no, he told me about that months ago. And I was confused because I didn't realize he had been planning this for so long. I had the feeling of divorce for a while, so I figured, okay, he might have the same feelings. Okay, but announcing it to people was entirely different. And then also come to find out, He had not only told her that our divorce process had already started, but we were both living lives as single people. And when she asked why we had gotten a divorce, he started a smear campaign on me. He told her, and come to find out later, has told everyone that we knew mutually that the only time he saw me is when I was demanding money or when I was telling him that he needs to babysit our daughter so that I could go out and go have sex with random men, which was not what was happening. Not even close. He was the one that was disappearing for days to weeks at a time. And I was just there with our daughter, not knowing what was going on. So she and I continued talking, and her little sister babysat for another woman and said that her little sister's been seeing my ex go over to this other woman's house, and he's been spending the night there and been spending days there at a time, and that they're a couple. And again, we had just had the divorce conversation last week. I had no idea that this was happening. So I'm finding out now. I'm already dealing with this emotional whiplash of being sad my marriage is ending, but at the same time being excited for my future. And now I'm finding out that I was being cheated on. And so I asked her how long this has been happening. She gives me a timeline, and then my phone rings, and it's my ex. And I had answered the phone, and I had asked him if he was cheating on me. And he said no. I brought up the woman's name. He said he didn't know her. He was just gaslighting me and kept insisting on it. And then we called my friend's sister and gotten the other woman's phone number. And I called the other woman and spoke with her. And she told me that they had been in a relationship for months at this point and that she was his girlfriend and that he had told her that we were completely divorced. It was already done and over. And they were planning on moving in together, and he was bringing our daughter on play dates with her and her son. And she and I get off the phone, and I'm sure she called my ex and gave him the rundown, and he calls me back. And all of a sudden, he does know who this woman is, and he wants a divorce anyways. So it doesn't matter what he's been doing. And so I go home and I talk with him, and I ask if she's the only one that he cheated on me with. And he said yes. And then I had this gut feeling of there was another woman that was his best friend from high school's wife. And I had a gut feeling about her. And I called her, and she said that not only had he slept with her, but he had also slept with her sister. And so within a week's time, I'm finding out after affair after affair. And some of these have been going on for over 2 years. And so things really started getting nasty because all of a sudden he has this reputation with people of being this amazing person, this hardworking person. You know, he's a mechanic. He'll come over, he'll fix your car, whatever you need for you. And I'm going around at the same time telling people he cheated on me with so many women, and I'm finding out about it. So the smear campaign that he was running against me really amped up. A lot of the people that he and I mutually knew still don't talk to me, still won't talk to me, still believe his side of the story instead of mine, which is fine because if they believe him, I don't need them in my life. But it is still, we live in a very small town. I teach in this town. It is still embarrassing and potentially has negative side effects on my career. So in August, I ended up moving out. And as I was moving out, he was moving in his most recent partner. She moved into my house the exact night that I moved out. He did not spend one day alone, one day by himself. He had only known this woman for a couple of months, and he moved her and her son into his house with my daughter. And to this day, still doesn't understand why I was uncomfortable with that. There's a lot of DARVO going on where the narrative is completely flipped. I'm all of a sudden abusive, I'm manipulative, I'm promiscuous. He is putting my name on a lot of the actions that he did. He has told me that I have brought men around our daughter and how unsafe that is. The only partner of mine she has ever met is my boyfriend, and she did not meet him until we were several months into our relationship. I believe that my honesty would protect me, and he has told so many people that the exact opposite has happened. It's really affected my trust in people, my trust in myself. There were so many times that through all of his gaslighting that I thought that I was crazy, to the point that without his knowledge, I started recording our conversations. That way later I could go back and I could re-listen to them, because I had this sense of, I don't know who this person is. That isn't my husband. I've known him for so long. And re-listening to the messages and going back to therapy really helped me understand that that was my husband speaking. That was the same person. Just because he's speaking out about things that feel crazy to me does not mean that some new person body swapped with him. He was just doing all of these things that I would never believe that he would.
So now that you're, in the aftermath, you know, how are you rebuilding, and, how are you doing with co-parenting or parallel parenting if co-parenting is very difficult, and, you're not just recovering from this is a lifetime of things that have compounded, and now you're here. So how is not just the relationship but everything as a whole, and then also dealing with, custody and parallel or co-parenting that's going on?
It's hard. To put it nicely, it's hard. It's really hard for me mentally because I never got the closure. I asked him so many times how many women he cheated on me with, how long he cheated on me for, and he's never given me that answer. And in fact, he's once again flipped his answer to, he went from having all of these affairs that he admitted to now he's only had an affair with his current partner. And that's been really hard because that I want to know that answer and I will never get that answer. And even if he gives me an answer, I will never fully believe him on anything ever again. It's been really hard because I found out that, he was bringing our daughter on dates with his affair partners. And that is so dangerous to me because you don't know these people super well. And a lot of these people knew that he was, or found out that he was married and chose to continue being with him. And that tells me that they have a low sense of self-worth, and that's someone that I do not want around my daughter, and yet they continue to be around my daughter. And anytime I bring these concerns to him, because I'll text him and say, "Hey, our daughter said that, this woman that you're just dating, you're not married to, nothing like that. She's insisting that our daughter needs to call her mom, and I don't think that's appropriate." Or is saying that she's being mean to her, or, a lot of his anger towards me is unfortunately being taken out on her daughter. If she goes to timeout, she has to do wall sits and timeout at his house. And I'm saying, that's abusive. That's terrible. Trying to have any sort of conversation with him to align our parenting styles a little bit more so she has some sort of sense of continuity going back and forth between our houses. And he does not listen to those concerns. He does not care about those concerns. When I bring up those concerns that I think are very valid, he'll bring up to me like, "Well, our daughter said that you didn't brush her hair before bed last night, and now her hair is really puffy and she doesn't like it. So you're neglecting her too." And I'm like, "You are grasping at straws right now. Her doing wall sits and timeout at 5 years old is not equal to having puffy hair. Those are not in the same realm of concern whatsoever." So it's been hard that way. We're really struggling we're just fighting each other every step of the way. I was the one making all the parenting decisions, and now all of a sudden, not only is he making his own parenting decisions, but he is also talking to people and talking to me like I'm an idiot and like I don't know how to parent our kid. And that's extremely frustrating. He's doing things to harm my time. I had her for Christmas this year, and he decided the day before she came to my house for Christmas to tell her that Santa wasn't real. So it's just any opportunity he has to take something away from me, he is still doing. And that is very frustrating. But ultimately, I'm just trying to live my life and be happy in my life and make my daughter's time with me as happy as I can. Legally, I know it sounds like there's a lot that I can do. Unfortunately, I live in Texas where corporal punishment is encouraged almost. So legally, there's not much I can do, which has been really frustrating. But I focus on her safety and joy with me. And I have her in gymnastics. I'm back in therapy. She's in therapy now. So I figure it's better for her to have a good house 50% of the time instead of 0% of the time. I have offered to work on rebuilding mine and his relationships more, but I told him that I want both of us to have honesty and accountability with our actions. And he is continuing to lie to me about every little thing that he can possibly lie to me about. So until he's able to be honest and accountable, which who knows when that'll happen, I hope it happens Sunday. We are just parallel parenting and trying to do things as separately as possible. And when he makes rules with our daughter for our house, I remind her that can be a rule at Papa's house. Mama gets to make the rule at Mama's house. I just want him to leave me alone.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
Life is so much better after you leave. If you're in an abusive situation that sounds familiar to any of this, it is so much better. It is so much brighter after you leave. I have gained so much since leaving this relationship. I'm not fighting with my partner to experience joy anymore. I have an amazing partner now. I've gained 2 sons through being with him. I have a community now. I have hobbies now. I have so much that makes me happy now. And I have a partner who supports those things and who's happy to see me experiencing those things instead of berating me about them or instead of fighting me to do them. If you want to heal, you can start at any time, and healing does not require anyone's permission. When you are stable and when you realize that you are stable and when you sit in a quiet house that feels like home, it is the best feeling in the world when you don't have to deal with that intensity all the time, the highs and lows anymore. It is the best feeling in the world. It is so much better to live in silence and live in happiness than intensity all of the time. Something that I live by was the only way out is through. Once I realized that I was leaving, I had to deal with leaving. I had to deal with all of the stress of exiting that relationship and getting a divorce and dealing with co-parenting because it meant that I would be out from underneath him. And as much as that sucked, it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
Well, Kris, I really want to thank you for being here with us today, sharing your story. You had all the elements in your story of coercive control that are going to validate everyone's experience. And I'm sorry that you went through all of this. And I noticed in our notes, you wrote, "What I lost, years of my life. What I gained, myself." And you also wrote here in your final truth, don't stay because you've already invested years. And you wrote sunk cost fallacy. as like a reminder to other people that, you might be in the relationship for a long time and you're like, I invested so much time in this, and it's a sunk cost fallacy that can keep people there even longer. And on the other side of it is finding yourself again or finding yourself for the first time. And you've gotten there, and everyone is happy that you got there, and you did a great job today. So I can't really thank you enough for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Kris, for being our guest today. And if you want to be a guest like Kris was today, please go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can fill out our guest form, or you can just send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also, at our website, we have a newsletter. So if you want to join our newsletter, we have the link in our show notes, or you can go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. And it is free, and people love our newsletter, and it includes a workbook for this episode. So go to our website and sign up there, or just click on the link in our show notes, and we will see you there. And also at our website, we have a support group. So join our support group at narcissistapocalypse.com. You click on the support group button at the top of the page. You'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people on there. So if you need support, join our support group today. And that is it for today's survivor story, today's episode. So for myself and Kris, we hope you have a good night.